The train whistle pierced the quiet afternoon as Josephine Zimmerman clutched her well-worn valise with trembling fingers, the rhythmic thump of her limping gait marking each painful step down the wooden platform. Alta, Utah, 1882, the final destination in her desperate journey westward, where a future husband supposedly waited. The pain in her left leg, permanently damaged from a childhood accident, seemed to intensify under the scrutiny of curious onlookers as she descended from the passenger car. "Mail-order bride," someone whispered, not quietly enough. "Poor fellow who gets her won't be getting much of a bargain." Josephine fixed her gaze on the distant mountains, pretending not to hear. She'd endured worse in Philadelphia, where her family's financial collapse after her father's death had left her with few options besides domestic service or marriage. The advertisement in the matrimonial news had promised a new beginning in a place where nobody knew her history, though she'd been honest about her condition in her letters. The station master approached, squinting at a scrap of paper. "Miss Zimmerman, from Philadelphia." "Yes, sir." She straightened her back, trying to appear taller than her 5 feet and 3 inches. "Well, I've got some news." He scratched his graying beard. "Your intended Mr. Hollister, he's reconsidered." The platform seemed to tilt beneath her. "Reconsidered?" "Said he wasn't informed about your—" His eyes flicked to her leg, then away. "Condition. Left word you shouldn't have come at all. Paid for a return ticket, though." He extended a ticket toward her, not quite meeting her eyes. Josephine didn't take it. She couldn't go back, not to the pitying stares and whispers that had followed her since childhood, not to the empty rooms of her family home, long since sold to pay her father's debts. Is there anyone else seeking a wife? I can cook, so keep accounts, miss. This is a mining town. Men here want strong women who can work alongside them, bear children, withstand the hardships." His voice softened slightly. "The return train leaves tomorrow morning. Hotel's just down the street." Tears threatened, but Josephine blinked them back. 22 years of life had taught her that tears solved nothing. "Thank you for your honesty, sir." She turned, limping toward the dusty main street of Alta, the weight of her uncertain future heavier than her modest baggage. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the muddy thoroughfare, lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and various businesses serving the silver mining operations that had birthed the town. The desk clerk at the Alta Hotel barely glanced at her as she paid for a room with precious coins from her dwindling savings. His disinterest was a mercy compared to the earlier rejection. In her small room, Josephine finally allowed herself to weep, not loudly or dramatically, but with the quiet dignity that had sustained her through her father's death, her mother's earlier passing, and the gradual dissolution of everything familiar. When the tears subsided, she washed her face in the basin of cool water and opened her valise. Among her few belongings lay a small advertisement clipped from a newspaper, the one that had brought her here. Below it was a packet of letters from Edwin Hollister, expressing his eagerness to meet her, his understanding of her situation, his promises of kindness. Lies, all of them. "I will not go back," she whispered to the empty room. "I cannot." She had enough money for perhaps 2 weeks of lodging and meals if she was frugal. 2 weeks to find some means of supporting herself in this town that had already rejected her. Morning brought no solutions, but did offer one small mercy: a vacancy for a bookkeeper at Yorath's general store, announced on a crudely lettered sign in the window. With her father having been an accountant who had taught her his trade, Josephine presented herself to Mr. Yorath, a barrel-chested man with spectacles perched on a bulbous nose. "A female bookkeeper," he scoffed, "and one who can't even walk properly." My leg does not affect my ability with numbers, sir, she replied steadily. My father was an accountant in Philadelphia and I assisted him for years. I can provide references. References from Philadelphia don't mean much in Alta. He regarded her skeptically. Why are you here anyway? Most women come as wives or, well, for other work. I was to be married, but the arrangement fell through. She maintained her dignity despite the humiliation burning her cheeks. Something in her composure must have impressed him. I can give you a trial, 3 days. If you prove yourself, we'll discuss wages. It wasn't ideal, but it was hope a fragile thread, but one she grasped firmly. The next evening, as Josephine was finishing the store's ledgers long after closing time, the bell above the door jangled. She looked up, startled to see a tall man silhouetted against the fading daylight. "We're closed, sir," she called. "Door was unlocked," came the reply as he stepped inside, revealing a man perhaps 30 years of age with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His clothes marked him as a rancher: dusty boots, worn denims, a faded shirt rolled at the sleeves to reveal corded forearms. "Need some supplies before heading back to my place. Got caught up with business in town longer than expected." There was something in the way he moved, confident but not arrogant, powerful yet restrained, that made Josephine straighten in her chair. "Mr. Yorath has gone home for the day, but I suppose I could help you gather what you need." The stranger nodded, then paused, taking in her seated position behind the counter. "You're new, bookkeeper, on trial," she admitted. "I'm Josephine Zimmerman." "Samuel Young," he replied, removing his hat to reveal dark hair in need of a trim. "Got a small ranch about 10 miles outside town." When she stood to help him, her limp was immediately apparent. She saw his gaze drop to her leg, then return to her face without the usual flash of pity or distaste. It was refreshing. "What supplies do you need, Mr. Young?" He listed several items: coffee, flour, ammunition for his rifle, some tools, and she moved about the store gathering them, acutely aware of his presence. Not once did he comment on her halting gait or offer unwanted assistance. As she tallied his purchases, he leaned against the counter. "You're not from around here?" "No, Philadelphia, long way from home." "This is my home now," she replied with more conviction than she felt. Something in her tone must have intrigued him. "Most Easterners don't last out here, especially women on their own." "I don't have much choice in the matter, Mr. Young." He studied her for a moment longer. "Well, Miss Zimmerman, I hope Alta treats you better than wherever you left behind." After he paid and gathered his supplies, he paused at the door. "By the way, your bookkeeping position, is it permanent?" "That depends on whether Mr. Yorath is satisfied with my work after my trial period." Samuel Young nodded thoughtfully. "Yorath's a fair man, but tight with his money. Don't let him pay you less than he would a man." With that advice, he departed, leaving Josephine with an odd feeling of having been truly seen for the first time since arriving in Alta. The following morning, she heard the full story of her abandoned engagement from the hotel proprietor's wife, who delivered it with the relish of fresh gossip. "Everyone knows about it now," Mrs. Davis said, pouring coffee. "Edwin Hollister took one look at that photograph you sent and thought he was getting a fine Philadelphia lady to class up his mining office. When your letter mentioned a slight difficulty walking, he pictured something dainty and temporary, not." She gestured vaguely toward Josephine's leg. "It's hardly a secret I try to keep," Josephine replied, her coffee suddenly bitter. "Well, 3 others were considering answering your advertisement after Hollister backed out. Saw your picture at the post office. You're prettier than most we get out here. But once they heard about the leg, they lost interest." She leaned closer. "Men here want women who can work from sunup to sundown. They figure you can't." "I've never shirked work in my life." Mrs. Davis patted her hand. "I believe you, dear, but men see what they want to see." That afternoon, Mr. Yorath offered her the bookkeeping position permanently at half the salary he would have paid a male bookkeeper, just as Samuel Young had predicted. Josephine negotiated firmly, securing 3/4 of the standard wage by demonstrating how her system had already identified several accounting errors that had been costing the store money. "You drive a hard bargain for a woman in your position," Yorath grumbled. "My position is that of a skilled bookkeeper who has saved you more in 3 days than you'll pay me in a month," she replied evenly. A reluctant smile cracked his stern face. "Very well, but I expect perfection for that price." With employment secured, Josephine found more affordable lodgings, a small room above the milliner's shop, owned by a widow named Florence Murphy. The room was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook for her few dresses, but it was clean and private. "Don't mind what folks say," Mrs. Murphy told her as she helped Josephine settle in. "This town's seen its share of broken people. The mines break men's bodies every day. At least you arrived with your spirit intact." Over the next 2 weeks, Josephine established a routine. Her days were spent at the general store, keeping the books and occasionally serving customers when Mr. Yorath was busy. Evenings she spent in her room, reading the few books she'd brought or writing in her journal. On Sundays, she attended the small church at the edge of town, ignoring the curious glances from the congregation. She saw Samuel Young twice more during this time, brief encounters at the store when he came for supplies. Each time, he treated her with a simple respect that required no explanation or apology for her condition. On the 3rd Sunday after her arrival in Alta, as Josephine was returning from church, she encountered a commotion outside the saloon. A crowd had gathered around 2 men, one she recognized as Edwin Hollister, the man who had rejected her sight unseen, and the other was Samuel Young. "You've no right to speak on the lady's behalf," Hollister was saying, his face flushed with drink despite the early hour. "I'm not speaking for her," Samuel replied, his voice measured but firm. "I'm telling you a gentleman doesn't spread lies about a woman's character just because he lacks the courage to honor his commitments." Josephine froze, realizing they were discussing her. "What would you know about it?" Hollister sneered. "I never claimed she was damaged goods, just said she wasn't what was advertised. She disclosed her condition in her letters. I've seen the copies you showed around at the miners' lodge. You knew exactly what you were agreeing to." Samuel's hands remained relaxed at his sides, but something in his posture suggested he was prepared for whatever might come. "A man has the right to change his mind when the merchandise isn't as expected," Hollister retorted, earning chuckles from some onlookers. In a movement almost too quick to follow, Samuel grabbed Hollister by the shirt front, his calm demeanor vanishing. "Miss Zimmerman is a lady, not merchandise. Apologize for suggesting otherwise." The crowd grew silent, tension crackling in the air. "Let him go, Mr. Young." All heads turned to see Josephine standing at the edge of the gathering, her chin high despite the mortification burning through her. Samuel released Hollister but didn't step back. "This doesn't concern you, Miss Zimmerman." "As it appears to be my honor under discussion, I believe it does." She moved forward, her limp more pronounced with each deliberate step, until she stood before Edwin Hollister. Up close, he was less impressive than she'd imagined, a soft, balding man with watery eyes and a weak chin. "Mr. Hollister," she said clearly enough for all to hear, "you were under no obligation to marry me once you decided I wasn't suitable. But neither are you entitled to malign my character to soothe your conscience. I would appreciate if you would extend me the basic courtesy of truthfulness in the future." Hollister had the grace to look abashed. I meant no offense, Miss Zimmerman. Yes, you did, she replied calmly, but I choose not to take it. Good day, gentlemen. She turned and walked away, focusing all her energy on maintaining a steady pace despite the pain flaring in her hip and the humiliation burning in her chest. She'd almost reached the corner when she heard footsteps behind her. Miss Zimmerman. Samuel's voice was softer now. May I walk with you? She hesitated, then nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked in silence until they reached the path leading to Mrs. Murphy's shop. That was bravely done, he finally said. It didn't feel brave. She stared straight ahead. It felt necessary. Sometimes they're the same thing. He stopped, turning to face her. I apologize if my interference made things worse. I overheard him at the saloon spinning tales about why he'd rejected you. Couldn't stomach it. Why should it matter to you? The question wasn't accusatory, merely puzzled. Samuel considered before answering. My sister had a twisted foot from birth. Died of fever when she was 16. She was the strongest person I ever knew, but people only saw the foot. Made me see things differently, I suppose. The simple explanation, offered without drama, touched something in Josephine. Thank you for defending me, even though it wasn't necessary. Wasn't it? A hint of a smile touched his lips. Way I see it, sometimes people need reminding of basic decency. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Samuel cleared his throat. I should be getting back. My foreman's expecting me. Of course. Thank you again, Mr. Young. He tipped his hat and turned to go, then paused. Miss Zimmerman, there's a social at the church next Saturday. Dance and supper to raise money for the new schoolhouse. Would you consider attending as my guest? The invitation caught her completely off guard. A dance, Mr. Young, I don't. There's more to these gatherings than dancing. Good food, conversation, chance to meet folks under better circumstances. His eyes held hers steadily. No obligation beyond that. Josephine hesitated, torn between self-protection and the genuine kindness in his gaze. I'll consider it. That's all I ask. He tipped his hat again. Good day, Miss Zimmerman. As she watched him walk away, Josephine felt something unfamiliar stir within her, not hope exactly, but perhaps its quieter cousin, possibility. The following Saturday arrived with alarming swiftness. Josephine spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation, alternating between certainty that she should decline Samuel's invitation and a desperate desire to accept it. You're being ridiculous, she told her reflection as she pinned up her hair that evening. It's merely a social gathering, not a declaration of intentions. Nevertheless, she wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton with a modest lace collar, the one indulgence she'd allowed herself before leaving Philadelphia. The color brought out the blue in her gray-blue eyes and complemented her brown hair, which she'd arranged in a simple but elegant style. Mrs. Murphy appeared in the doorway as Josephine was fastening the last button. Well, don't you look lovely? Mr. Young will be pleased. It's not. Josephine began, then sighed. Is it terribly obvious that he's sweet on you, or that you're fluttered by it? The older woman smiled. Both, I'm afraid, but only to those with eyes to see. He's being kind, nothing more, Josephine insisted, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. Samuel Young isn't known for empty gestures, Mrs. Murphy replied. He's a man who says what he means and means what he says. Unlike most in these parts. A knock at the shop door downstairs interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Murphy winked. That'll be your gentleman caller. Josephine took a deep breath, checked her appearance one final time, and made her way carefully down the stairs. Samuel stood just inside the doorway, hat in hand. He'd cleaned up considerably. His usually disheveled dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a pressed shirt with a string tie under a well-worn but clean vest. He looked up as she descended. and something in his expression made her momentarily forget the pain in her leg. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual, "you look beautiful." The simple compliment, delivered without artifice, warmed her more than elaborate flattery ever could. "Thank you, Mr. Young. You look very handsome yourself." The church social hall was already crowded when they arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over trestle tables laden with food brought by the community. At one end of the room, a small group of musicians tuned their instruments, a fiddle, guitar, and accordion. Conversations faltered momentarily as they entered, curious eyes taking in the unexpected pair. Josephine felt the familiar discomfort of being scrutinized, but was steadied by Samuel's solid presence beside her. "Ignore them," he murmured, offering his arm. "They'll find something new to gossip about before the night's over." He led her to a table where several people were already seated, introducing her to his foreman, Jacob Miller, and Miller's wife Sarah, along with the town doctor and his family. The conversation flowed more easily than Josephine had expected, with no one mentioning her limp or her failed engagement. When the dancing began, Josephine steeled herself for an awkward refusal, but Samuel surprised her. "Would you like some punch?" he asked instead of an invitation to dance. "Or we could step outside for some air. Get stuffy in here with so many people." Relief and gratitude washed through her. Air would be lovely. Outside, the spring evening was cool but pleasant. Stars dusted the vast Utah sky, more brilliant than anything Josephine had seen in Philadelphia. "Thank you," she said quietly as they strolled slowly around the churchyard, "for not asking me to dance." Samuel shrugged. "Figured you might be tired of people expecting things you'd rather not do." The simple consideration in his words touched her deeply. "May I ask you something, Mr. Young?" "Samuel, please, and yes." "Why did you invite me tonight?" Truly, he was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "When I first saw you at Yorath's store, you had this dignity about you. Like you'd faced worse than anything Alta could throw at you and were still standing. Made me curious." He glanced at her. "Then I heard about Hollister and the others who'd rejected you without so much as meeting you properly, and I got angry. Not because I pitied you, because it seemed so damn foolish to dismiss someone with your spirit over something that doesn't matter a whit. My limp doesn't matter to you." She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "Does my scar matter to you?" He turned, pointing to a thin white line that ran from his right temple into his hairline, barely visible in the moonlight. "I hadn't noticed it," she admitted. "Got it when I was thrown from a horse at 16. Nearly died. Doesn't define me, though." He looked directly at her. "Your limp is part of you, not all of you. Simple as that." They continued walking, a comfortable silence settling between them. Eventually, they circled back to the church as the music swelled inside. "Miss Zimmerman, Josephine," Samuel began, stopping beneath a cottonwood tree. "I'd like to call on you properly, if you'd permit it." Her heart fluttered traitorously. "Are you certain people will talk? Let them. I'm not concerned with their opinions." His expression grew serious. "But if you'd rather not, I'll understand." Josephine studied his face in the silver moonlight, searching for any hint of pity or insincerity. Finding none, she took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown. "I would like that very much, Samuel." The weeks that followed brought a subtle but definite shift in Josephine's life in Alta. Samuel called on her regularly, sometimes for walks around town, other times bringing her to his ranch for Sunday dinner after church. The 10-mile journey in his wagon was bumpy, but worth every jolt for the chance to see the place he'd built with his own hands. The young ranch was modest compared to some in the territory, but thriving: a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings surrounded by grazing land, where a growing herd of cattle roamed. Unlike many ranchers who'd claimed vast tracts of land, Samuel had purchased his property outright, expanding methodically as his means allowed. "Started with 20 acres and 6 cows 8 years ago," he explained as he showed her around one Sunday in late May. "Now up to 400 acres and nearly 100 head. Not the biggest spread, but it's mine free and clear." "It's impressive," Josephine said, meaning it. The house in particular spoke of care and attention to detail, simple but solid, with large windows that flooded the rooms with light. "Built it thinking someday I'd have a family," he admitted, a flush creeping up his neck. "Seemed foolish sometimes, rattling around in here alone. Jacob and Sarah live in the smaller house by the barn, but it's not the same as having your own family." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. As spring yielded to summer, their courtship progressed with a deliberate pace that suited them both. Samuel was unfailingly considerate of Josephine's limitations, without drawing attention to them finding places to sit when they walked together, positioning his wagon to make it easier for her to climb up and down, slowing his naturally long stride to match hers. For her part, Josephine found herself relaxing in his company, the constant vigilance she'd maintained for years gradually easing. She continued her work at Yorath's store, but her evenings and Sundays belonged increasingly to Samuel. The townsfolk of Alta adjusted to the unexpected pairing with varying degrees of acceptance. Some, like Mrs. Murphy, were openly supportive. Others, including Edwin Hollister, maintained a distance tinged with disapproval or bewilderment. "You could have any woman in the county," Josephine overheard one of Samuel's ranch hands telling him outside the general store one afternoon. "Why settle for one that's broken?" Samuel's response, delivered in a voice like steel wrapped in velvet, carried clearly through the open window. "If I ever hear you speak of Miss Zimmerman that way again, you'll be looking for work elsewhere. Are we clear?" The man mumbled an apology, and Josephine slipped away before they could enter, her heart pounding not from humiliation but from the fierce protectiveness in Samuel's tone. That evening, as they sat on the small porch outside Mrs. Murphy's shop watching the sunset paint the mountains, Samuel took her hand. "I heard what Pierce said today," he began. "As did I," she admitted. "I fired him." Josephine turned to him, startled. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." His jaw was set. "Not just for you, for my ranch. Can't have a man working for me who judges people by their weaknesses instead of their strengths. Makes for poor decisions with the livestock, too." The matter-of-fact way he connected respect for her with good business sense was so quintessentially Samuel that Josephine couldn't help but laugh. "What's funny?" he asked, a smile tugging at his lips. "You," she replied. "You make everything so simple." "Not everything." His expression grew serious as he turned to face her fully. "Josephine, there's something I need to say, and I'd appreciate if you'd hear me out completely before responding." Her pulse quickened. "Of course." Samuel took a deep breath. "When you came to Alta, you were meant to be someone else's wife. That fell through and you made your own way instead. I admire that more than I can say." He squeezed her hand. "I've grown to care for you deeply these past months, more than care. I love you. Your strength, your dignity, your sharp mind and sharper wit." Tears pricked at Josephine's eyes, but she remained silent as promised. "I'm not offering marriage because I think you need rescuing or because I pity you," he continued. "I'm offering because I believe we could build something real together, a partnership based on mutual respect and affection. But I need you to be sure. This isn't Philadelphia. Life out here is hard, even with 2 good legs. I won't pretend otherwise." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a modest sapphire. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it as my wife, not because you have no other options, but because you choose me as I choose you." The tears spilled over then, coursing down Josephine's cheeks unchecked. "Samuel," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "when I came west, I thought I was accepting a life of compromised security in exchange for passion, respect in place of love. I never dared hope for both." She looked down at the ring, then back to his face. "You've never once made me feel that my injury defines me. You've truly seen me from the first day. That's worth more than I can express." She drew a steadying breath. "Yes, Samuel Young. I will marry you. Not from necessity, but from love, deep, unexpected, wonderful love." The kiss they shared then was gentle but electric, a promise of all that awaited them. They were married 3 weeks later in the same church where they had attended the social. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, attended by most of the town. Even Edwin Hollister came, offering a stiff but sincere congratulation afterward. "You found something better than what I could have offered," he told Josephine at the reception. "I wish you well, truly." "Thank you," she replied, surprised by her lack of bitterness. The man who had rejected her now seemed pathetically small compared to the one who had chosen her. Their wedding night brought the expected nervousness, but Samuel's tenderness and patience transformed uncertainty into joy. In his arms, Josephine discovered aspects of herself long suppressed: passion, playfulness, and a deep capacity for physical pleasure that transcended the limitations of her body. "You're perfect," he whispered against her hair as they lay entwined in the large bed that was now theirs. "Perfect for my heart, always." The first year of marriage brought both joys and challenges. Josephine learned to manage a ranch household, a far cry from her urban upbringing, while continuing to keep books for Yorath's store 2 days a week. Her city-bred cooking skills improved gradually under Sarah Miller's tutelage, and she discovered an unexpected talent for garden cultivation. Samuel proved to be a considerate husband in all ways, never showing frustration on the days when Josephine's leg pained her too much for regular activities. Together they developed a rhythm that accommodated her limitations while maximizing her strengths. "You're better with figures than I ever was," he told her one evening as they reviewed the ranch accounts together. "We've saved nearly 15% on supplies since you took over the ordering." "And you're better with people than I'll ever be," she replied, watching him charm the local banker into extending their loan for new breeding stock. Winter came early that first year, bringing heavy snowfall that isolated the ranch for weeks at a time. Josephine discovered she didn't mind the seclusion, the cozy evenings by the fire, reading aloud to Samuel or simply talking, were a luxury she had never anticipated. In the spring, as new calves dotted the pastures, Josephine shared news of their own impending addition: a baby. Samuel's face registered shock, then pure joy as he lifted her into a careful embrace. "Are you certain? Dr. Winters confirmed it yesterday when I was in town," she replied, laughing through happy tears. "He says I'm about 3 months along, due in late October." Samuel's expression clouded briefly. "Your leg will pregnancy be difficult for you. The doctor says many women with hip problems find pregnancy challenging but not impossible. I'll need to be careful, especially in the later months." She touched his cheek. "Are you worried?" "Only that you might suffer," he admitted. "Otherwise, I couldn't be happier." As her pregnancy progressed, Josephine's mobility became increasingly limited. By August, she relied on a cane even for short distances around the house. Samuel responded by rearranging their living spaces to minimize her movement, bringing a comfortable chair into the kitchen so she could direct meal preparation while sitting. and installing a rope system that allowed her to call for help when needed. "You've thought of everything," she marveled as he showed her the modifications. "Not everything," he replied with a grin, "but I'm trying." Her labor began during the first snowfall of October, a gentle dusting that transformed the landscape into a white wonderland. Dr. Winters had been staying at the ranch for the past week in anticipation of the birth, a precaution Samuel had insisted upon despite the expense. The delivery was difficult, but not the ordeal they had feared. 16 hours after the first contraction, Josephine gave birth to a healthy son with a powerful set of lungs and his father's storm-gray eyes. "James," Samuel suggested as he held his son for the first time, his voice thick with emotion. "After your father." Josephine, exhausted but radiant, nodded. "James Samuel Young." Parenthood brought new challenges but also deepened the bond between them. Samuel proved to be an attentive father, often wearing little James in a sling across his chest while he worked around the ranch house so Josephine could rest her leg. "Never thought I'd see Samuel Young changing diapers," Jacob Miller commented one day. "Marriage has changed you, boss." Samuel merely smiled. "For the better, I hope." As James grew from infant to toddler, his boundless energy sometimes highlighted the limitations Josephine's condition imposed on her mothering. There were days when she couldn't chase after him or lift him as freely as she wished, moments when frustration threatened to overwhelm her. "I want to be the mother he deserves," she confessed to Samuel one evening after a particularly difficult day when James had wandered dangerously close to the horse corral while she struggled to reach him. "You are," Samuel assured her. "He has your intelligence, your determination. He'll grow up seeing his mother overcome challenges. Every day, what better example could there be?" His unflagging support sustained her through the difficult times, as did the joy of watching their son develop his own unique personality, stubborn like his father, thoughtful like his mother, and curious about everything. When James was 2, a letter arrived from Philadelphia that shattered the peaceful rhythm of their lives. Josephine's aunt, her father's sister whom she hadn't seen since childhood, had died and inexplicably left her entire estate to her long-neglected niece. "It's substantial," Josephine said, stunned as she read the lawyer's assessment. "The house on Chestnut Street, investments, even some property outside the city. She never married or had children. I had no idea she was so well off." Samuel studied her face carefully. "Does this change things for you? Do you want to go back to Philadelphia?" The question startled her. "Why would you think that? You could have the life you were born to: society, culture, comfort. James could have advantages I can't provide here." His voice was steady, but she saw the fear in his eyes. Josephine set the letter aside and took her husband's weathered hands in hers. "Samuel Young, listen carefully. Philadelphia holds nothing for me anymore. Everything I love, everything I need is right here. You, James, our home. This is the life I choose every day." Relief washed over his features. "Are you sure?" "More certain than I've ever been about anything," she promised, sealing her words with a kiss. They decided to use the inheritance to expand the ranch, purchasing adjoining land that Samuel had long coveted and investing in superior breeding stock. A portion was set aside for James's education and for improvements to the ranch house, including a special bathtub with a copper boiler that eased the pain in Josephine's leg during cold weather. The ranch flourished under their joint stewardship. Samuel's practical knowledge of cattle and land management complemented Josephine's head for business and finance. By their 5th wedding anniversary, the Young Ranch was one of the most prosperous in the county, known for its quality livestock and fair dealings. That spring brought another surprise. At 31, Josephine found herself expecting their second child. "Are you happy about it?" she asked Samuel as they sat on the porch swing he'd built the previous summer, watching 4-year-old James attempt to rope a wooden practice calf. "Deliriously," he replied, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Though I worry about you more this time. You're older and the last pregnancy was hard on your leg. Dr. Winters says I'm healthy otherwise, and this time we know what to expect." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I'd like a daughter, a little girl with your kindness and maybe not my stubbornness." Samuel laughed. "I like your stubbornness. It's kept you fighting when others would have given up." Their daughter arrived in November, Elizabeth Florence Young, named for Samuel's mother and their friend Mrs. Murphy, who had passed away the previous winter. Unlike her brother's dramatic entry, Elizabeth's birth was remarkably straightforward, as if the child already possessed her mother's determination to overcome obstacles with minimal fuss. "She's perfect," Samuel whispered, holding his daughter while James peered curiously at his new sister. "Just like her mother." The following years brought both prosperity and contentment to the young family. James grew into a thoughtful, capable boy who shadowed his father around the ranch, absorbing everything about cattle and land management. Elizabeth, 3 years his junior, proved to be a spirited child with her father's calm temperament and her mother's quick mind. When a new schoolhouse was built in Alta, Josephine was asked to serve on the school board, a position that recognized both her education and her standing in the community. Once a week, she traveled to town with the children, conducting her business at Yorath's store, where she still kept the books part-time, while James and Elizabeth attended classes. These weekly trips often concluded with dinner at the hotel restaurant, a small luxury that became a family tradition. It was during one such dinner when James was 9 and Elizabeth 6 that Josephine noticed Edwin Hollister watching them from across the room. "Should we invite him to join us?" she suggested to Samuel. "He looks lonely." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "The man who rejected you." "You're a better person than I am." "Not better, just different. Besides, his rejection led me to you. In a way, I owe him my happiness." Samuel considered, then nodded. "If you wish it, then yes." Hollister accepted the invitation with evident surprise, settling awkwardly into the empty chair at their table. Over the course of the meal, the initial discomfort gave way to polite conversation. The years had not been kind to Edwin. His mining investments had soured, his health had deteriorated, and he had never married. "Your children are a credit to you both," he said as they were finishing dessert. His eyes lingered on Elizabeth, who was carefully cutting her apple pie into precise bites. "You've built a fine family." "Thank you," Josephine replied sincerely. "I hope you're well, Edwin." A shadow crossed his face. "Well enough, though I often wonder." He trailed off, then straightened. "Well, no use dwelling on what might have been." As they left the restaurant, Samuel took Josephine's arm. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked quietly while the children walked ahead. "What your life would have been like if Hollister hadn't changed his mind?" "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with regret, with gratitude." She squeezed his hand. "Everything, my injury, coming west, being rejected, it all led me to you. How could I regret any of it?" The 10th anniversary of their wedding found them hosting a celebration at the ranch, not the modest property of their early marriage, but an expansive operation with multiple hired hands, 2,000 acres, and one of the finest herds in the territory. Friends and neighbors gathered to share in their milestone, including Jacob and Sarah Miller, now grandparents themselves, and Mr. Yorath, stooped with age but still sharp-witted. After the guests had departed and the children were tucked into bed, Samuel led Josephine to the cottonwood tree they'd planted near the house shortly after their marriage. Now tall and spreading, It offered shade in summer and a windbreak in winter. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside lay a gold locket, intricately engraved with their initials and the date of their wedding. When opened, it contained miniature portraits of James and Elizabeth on one side and a lock of Samuel's hair on the other. "It's beautiful," Josephine whispered as he fastened it around her neck. "Not as beautiful as you." He traced the line of her jaw tenderly. "10 years ago, I told you that you were perfect for my heart. That's truer now than it was then. Even with more gray in my hair and more pain in my leg," she teased, though the question held a hint of genuine vulnerability. "Especially then," he replied. "Every line on your face, every silver hair there a map of our life together. I wouldn't change a single one." As they stood beneath the cottonwood, the stars emerging in the vast Utah sky above them, Josephine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The frightened, rejected woman who had limped off the train in Alta seemed like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. "What are you thinking?" Samuel asked, his arms encircling her waist. "That I'm grateful for this leg," she replied, surprising herself with the realization. "Without it, I might never have found you, never known what it means to be truly accepted, truly loved." "Then I'm grateful for it too," he murmured against her hair, "though I'd love you just the same without it." "I know," she said simply. "That's why I love you." As the years continued to pass, the young family weathered the changes that time inevitably brings. James, at 18, departed for college in Denver, the first in Alta to pursue higher education, funded by the investments from Josephine's inheritance. His parting was bittersweet, a natural progression tinged with the ache of separation. "He'll come back," Samuel assured Josephine as they watched the stage carry their son away. "This land is in his blood now." Elizabeth, now 15, blossomed into a young woman who combined her father's practicality with her mother's intelligence. Unlike many girls her age who focused solely on potential marriages, she expressed interest in veterinary medicine after helping the local doctor save a prized mare and her foal during a difficult birth. "Is it inappropriate for me to consider such a profession?" she asked Josephine one evening as they sat mending by the fire. "Perhaps in some eyes," Josephine replied thoughtfully, "but those aren't eyes worth heeding. If this is your passion, your father and I will support you as we do James." The ranch continued to prosper, though not without challenges. A severe drought tested their resources, followed by a harsh winter that claimed nearly a quarter of their herd. Through it all, Samuel and Josephine faced each difficulty as they always had together, drawing strength from their partnership. In their 20th year of marriage, as spring returned to the mountains around Alta, Josephine received a letter from James announcing his engagement to the daughter of a Denver physician. "Catherine is eager to meet you both," he wrote. "We plan to return to Alta after the wedding. The city has its attractions, but the ranch is home." "Did you ever doubt it?" Samuel asked as they read the letter together. "Not truly," she admitted, "though I feared Denver might seduce him with its opportunities." "Nothing compares to what we've built here," Samuel replied, his arm around her waist as they stood on the porch overlooking their domain, the fertile pastures, the sturdy barns, the bunkhouse where their ranch hands lived, the kitchen garden Josephine had nurtured to remarkable productivity despite the challenging climate. "No," she agreed softly. "Nothing compares." James and Catherine's wedding that autumn brought new joy to the family. The young couple settled into the smaller house on the property that had once been occupied by the Millers, who had retired to live with their daughter in California years before. James took on increasing responsibility for the ranch operations, freeing Samuel to focus on expanding their breeding program, and Josephine to manage the increasingly complex financial aspects of their business. Elizabeth departed for veterinary training in Chicago the following year, her determination overcoming the reluctance of the admissions committee to accept a female student. Her letters home were filled with descriptions of city life and the challenges of being the only woman in her class. "She sounds happy," Samuel observed as they read her latest correspondence by lamplight. "Challenged but not defeated. Like someone else I know," Josephine replied with a smile, massaging her perpetually aching hip. The pain in her leg had worsened with age, as Dr. Winters had warned it might. On the worst days, she relied on a wheelchair Samuel had specially ordered from Denver, with wide wheels designed to navigate the ranch's uneven terrain. On better days, a cane or Samuel's steady arm sufficed. When Elizabeth returned from Chicago 4 years later, she brought not only her hard-won credentials, but also a quiet, bookish colleague named David Parker, who clearly adored her. Within a year, they had established the region's first dedicated veterinary practice, operating from a converted barn on the young property. "Did you ever imagine this?" Josephine asked Samuel as they watched Elizabeth and David examine a sick calf, their movements synchronized by shared knowledge and mutual respect. "Our daughter, a doctor of veterinary medicine. I imagined our children would find their own paths," Samuel replied. "Whether those paths led them away from us or back to us would be their choice. I'm just grateful both paths led home." The arrival of grandchildren, first James and Catherine's twins, then Elizabeth and David's son, brought new vitality to the ranch. Samuel, his dark hair now liberally streaked with silver, proved to be an indulgent grandfather, teaching the little ones to ride almost before they could walk. Josephine's health began to decline in their 30th year of marriage. The chronic pain in her hip worsened, and a chest ailment that began as a winter cold lingered into spring, leaving her weak and short of breath. "You need to rest more," Samuel insisted, his concern evident in the lines that deepened around his eyes. "There's too much to do," she protested, though she found herself acquiescing more often than not. Dr. Winters, himself now elderly, recommended a trip to a sanatorium in Colorado known for treating respiratory conditions. Samuel made arrangements immediately, despite Josephine's reluctance to leave the ranch. "The children can manage without us for a few months," he assured her. "Your health matters more than anything else." The sanatorium, set high in the Colorado mountains where the air was clear and crisp, provided treatments that gradually restored Josephine's strength. Daily walks, carefully supervised and limited to her capacity, specialized breathing exercises, and the attentive care of the medical staff combined to reverse the worst of her symptoms. Samuel remained by her side throughout, reading to her when she was too tired to hold a book, wheeling her onto the broad veranda to enjoy the mountain views, and stubbornly refusing to discuss ranch business except in the most general terms. "You're supposed to be resting your mind as well as your body," he insisted when she pressed for details about the spring calving. "My mind doesn't know how to rest," she retorted. "It never has." Then directed elsewhere. "Tell me a story about Philadelphia, something you've never told me before." And so she did, sharing memories of her childhood that had long been buried, recalling the vibrant city life she had left behind, speaking of her parents and the dreams they had held for her before life intervened. "You think they would have approved of how things turned out?" she asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Your parents," Samuel considered. "I think they would have wanted you to be loved, to be respected for who you are, to find purpose and joy." He took her hand, the skin now thin and mapped with delicate veins. By those measures, I believe they would be proud. When they returned to the ranch 3 months later, Josephine's health was much improved. The familiar landscape welcomed them home, the jagged peaks that cradled their valley, the meandering creek that watered their pastures, the sturdy ranch house that had sheltered their family through decades of seasons. "It feels like we've been gone years instead of months," she remarked as their wagon approached the main house, where James, Catherine, Elizabeth, David, and all the grandchildren waited to greet them. "Some places do that," Samuel replied, his hand covering hers. "They become so much a part of you that separation feels unnatural." "Like some people," she said softly, meeting his gaze, his smile, still capable of quickening her pulse after more than 30 years, was answer enough. The years that followed brought changes to Alta and to the young ranch. The arrival of the railroad transformed the once isolated mining town into a growing community. New businesses appeared on the main street, and the one-room schoolhouse expanded to accommodate the children of families drawn by the promise of prosperity in the high mountain valley. The ranch adapted too, with James introducing new breeding techniques and Elizabeth's veterinary expertise keeping their livestock healthier than competing operations. Samuel gradually handed over day-to-day management to the younger generation, though he remained involved in major decisions and could still be found riding the fence lines well into his 70s. Josephine's health stabilized, her respiratory issues manageable with careful attention to avoiding cold and exertion. Her mobility continued to decline, however, until she relied on the wheelchair for all but the shortest distances. Samuel modified the ranch house accordingly, widening doorways and installing ramps where steps had been. "You've turned our home into an invalid's residence," she protested when he showed her the changes. "I've turned our home into a place where you can move freely," he corrected gently. "There's a difference." On their 40th wedding anniversary, the entire extended family, now including great-grandchildren, gathered for a celebration that drew friends and neighbors from throughout the county. The young ranch had become a cornerstone of the community, known not just for its superior cattle but for its hospitality and fair dealings. As twilight settled over the gathering, Samuel escorted Josephine to the cottonwood tree that had grown massive over the decades, its spreading branches creating a natural pavilion. There, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built together, he presented her with a journal bound in soft leather. "I've been working on this for years," he admitted as she opened it to find page after page filled with his surprisingly elegant handwriting. "It's our story, how we met, how no one wanted the limping mail-order bride until a foolish cowboy recognized what everyone else had overlooked." Tears blurred Josephine's vision as she read the opening lines. "The first time I saw her, she stood straight as a pine despite the pain I could read in her eyes. Dignity, I thought. Here is a woman who knows suffering but refuses to be defined by it." "Samuel," she whispered, unable to find words adequate to express what the gift meant to her. "I wanted our grandchildren and their children to know," he explained, his voice rough with emotion, "how two imperfect people built something perfect together, how love sees what others miss." That night, after the guests had departed and the house had quieted, they sat together on the porch as they had countless evenings before, watching the stars emerge above their beloved mountains. "Did I ever tell you," Samuel said, his voice soft in the darkness, "that the moment I knew I loved you was when you stood up to Hollister outside the saloon?" "No," she replied, surprised. "You never mentioned that. You were so fierce, so dignified." "I thought, there's a woman who will never need rescuing, but who deserves to be cherished all the same." He reached for her hand, his fingers entwining with hers in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. You're still that woman, Josephine Young. And you're still the only man who ever looked at me and saw strength instead of brokenness, she responded, leaning her head against his shoulder. As the night deepened around them, stars blazing in the clear mountain air, Josephine reflected on the long journey from that train platform in Alta, where a frightened young woman had faced rejection and despair. The pain in her leg was still there, would always be there, but it had ceased to define her long ago. Instead, she was defined by the love she had found, the family she had raised, the community she had helped build. By the man beside her who had recognized what others had overlooked, that a limping gait could not diminish a soaring spirit, that physical imperfection was no barrier to a perfect love. "You're perfect for my heart," Samuel had told her on their wedding night. Always. 40 years later, beneath a canopy of stars on the land they had nurtured together, those words remained the truest thing either of them had ever known.